5, 4, 3, 2. Boom. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting guest. I'm happy to share with you Robby Yung, the CEO of Animoca Brands. Robby, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
So I wanted to kind of start back in time. Do you want to share us a little bit about your history? Maybe pick that moment in time that feels, I guess, integrated into how you ended up where you are today.
Good question. I think it actually has to be when I first started working in gaming together with Yat, the co-founder of the business. Back in 2012, when I first joined, the company had been around for a few years already making games, and I was new to games, but I'd always been in TMT, telecoms, media, technology. I'd done internet, I'd done mobile, telephony, paging. I'd done traditional ad-supported media, TV, magazines, outdoor, and it was after about 6 months in gaming that I realized that this was really like it felt like where I was meant to be, because it was kind of the confluence of everything I'd ever done before. Because mobile games is a bit, it's mobile, obviously. It's definitely internet. It's media. It's advertising. So it's all of those things wrapped up into a single product. So yeah, I think I kind of felt like I was coming home.
Well, that's great. The play to earn sector has been really surprising to me. There's a few things I want to go over. Let's take a broad perspective and rewind, I guess, just back to 2017, 2018. You guys are making early investments in things like Dapper Labs, Sandbox. You really saw a curve of ideas and technology that I totally missed the boat on. I'm a huge fan of this sector. I caught Bitcoin. I found Solana and Avalanche early on, but this entire space has been kind of a big surprise and a welcome surprise to me. Tell us about what it was like back in 2017 finding some of these ideas, because it was beyond my scope.
Sure. Well, I think, a little bit of it is like always, just luck and right place, right time. I think when we first, we discovered crypto a while ago, just as hobbyists and stuff like other people. But I think it was in the autumn of 2017 when we got to know what became Dapper Labs, the team at Axiom Zen at the time. And it was through some mutual friends in Vancouver, where they're based. And I think the thing about what they were doing with CryptoKitties at that time, which is the project that we collaborated with them on to publish in Greater China, when we learned about what they were doing with that game and the idea of basically giving true digital ownership and digital property rights to gamers, it's one of those things that is you can't unthink it. Once you know that idea, it just seems so logical. And we basically saw the intersection of two different trends. On the one hand, there was the idea that in gaming, you're going to be able to offer gamers, essentially the exact same experience they already have. They buy in-game currency, a virtual currency, and they spend that virtual currency on virtual stuff. That's what gamers have done for more than a decade. That's the free-to-play model. But when you tokenize it, you tokenize that in-game currency. It becomes an ERC20 fungible token, and you tokenize those in-game items as NFTs. But what that gives you is the ability to do so in a really secure way that's never been done before. So there was that part of it that was really interesting. Then the second part was kind of market oriented. The ICO summer had just happened in 2017, and people had gone and spent lots of money buying into various blockchain projects. And most of them had little in the way of delivered product at that point. They were mostly just building dreams. And so we thought, okay, what's logical? Now, all these people have tons of tokens, literally billions of dollars of tokens that they've bought, and they don't really have anything to spend those tokens on. So if we made games that accept tokens, do you think they'd spend their tokens on our games? And the idea was really that simple, because we make games. We're always looking for customers who will spend money in our games. And I think that's kind of how it started. And then it was enough to get us to sort of dig more deeply to really understand what the technology was capable of. And then, 6 months later, we're up to our necks and we never look back.
Oh, fantastic. I've really enjoyed it because it's significantly less contentious than layer one software conversations or technology conversations. There's something really enjoyable about the game sector that really kind of surprised me, and also a lot about identity that I didn't totally recognize right away. I was originally looking at identity likely from the government side of things, but here we've seen a lot of identity within the characters, the NFT sector. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the growth of the ecosystem that you guys are building, and why you're taking such I guess, a broad spectrum approach to the
Sure.
investment style?
Sure. So I think we split our business into two parts. One is obviously we make games, and we have studios that make games, and probably the most famous of those now is the Sandbox, and we make all different kinds of games. On the other side of the house, we also have a strategic investment initiative where we make minority investments into other people in the ecosystem, predominantly game companies, but also lots of people who are building the infrastructure of the blockchain games business. Everybody from layer one chains to layer two scaling solutions, wallets, DeFi protocols, you name it, stuff that works together with the games that we make. And we took that approach again at the beginning. We took that approach because it was a necessary approach, meaning when we first got into this business, the people who around us were, essentially startup companies, and who have become, major innovators in the space, companies like Dapper or OpenSea or Sky Mavis with Axie Infinity. These were all startups at the time, and they needed money because they were having a hard time surviving. And particularly when we went into sort of the crypto winter, it was tough going. And we were in a position to, offer them capital. So we made investments in these companies because we felt it was important as a player in the ecosystem to make sure there was an ecosystem to be part of ultimately, because if these companies didn't survive, then there wasn't going to be an industry for us to play in either. And I think that strategy broadened over time because at the end of the day, one of the things that really separates what we're doing on blockchain and why we call it the metaverse, and we didn't call incredible MMO games that are made in Web 2 metaverse, is because things interoperate. And the idea that we can take all of these projects that we're making and connect them together. That is something that also means that as we have an investment strategy where we invest in lots of things that on the surface may look disparate, in fact, they all can connect together and they all have an impact upon each other. And so I think that's what unifies the strategy.
Nice. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me. Kind of like the mycelium. To grow a network, you need to have a lot of different connection points going out there.
Mhm.
So you guys recently acquired Blowfish Studios and are working on Phantom Galaxies. This is a fantastic looking game. Can you tell
Mhm.
us about, I guess, the kind of transition from the kind of investing with CryptoKitties to building these more advanced games
Sure.
and the in-game economies involved?
Sure. I think the idea was, as the industry has matured, it's not mature by any stretch, but it's maturing. And as we learn more about what is possible to be done, integrating blockchain into games, I think our ambitions have gotten bigger. Phantom Galaxies is a perfect example of this because it's, the first AAA blockchain game. And what we wanted to do was to create a very rich experience that appeals to fans, fans with big imaginations. It's a space themed game, and you have mech warrior robots in space, and it doesn't really get any bigger than that. And yet we wanted to also be able to innovate and show people what can be done with the blockchain in a game like that. So we created, playable NFT characters, and we created planets and galaxy ecosystems. And and we also decided when it comes, excuse me, when it comes to creating the token economy in the game, apologies. One second. When it comes to creating the token economy in the game, we decided not to launch a token in the traditional fashion for the in-game economy. We decided that we wanted to position it in such a way as to encourage people to participate in the game economy as players and participants, not simply investors. There's nothing wrong with investors, but we want to make sure to have a diversity of types of audiences playing in the game. And so what we did was created a mechanic where in order to obtain tokens, first you have to invest in planets. or asteroids for small planets, and then you have to mine them and you have to work them. And when you work them, they will emit tokens. And so if you want tokens, you need to do the work. And that's an important part, because what we want to do is we want to try to foster community, and we want people to get into the experience and enjoy it and have fun. And a byproduct of building community and having fun is that you may earn tokens and there may be a reward there as a result, but we want you to come in and partake of the community because we think that's important.
I'm extraordinarily new to the gaming sector, but I'm fascinated by a few of the conversations that are going on. One of them, which is kind of there are gatekeepers to a lot of these big games because they're so expensive, and you kind of had the esports teams and the average player wall gardened out of much of what was going on. How do you feel the DAO and the decentralization of these communities are going to affect the growth and the potential of the games and the communities that or I guess the games that these communities like to play?
Sure. Well, I think what you have with guilds and DAOs and esports teams is you essentially just have very organized player groups. So I think what that means is that there's a sort of a way for game developers to have B2B outreach, because you can bring on board a guild and it's a way to onboard a large number of users in one fell swoop. But I don't think it necessarily changes the way you design your game. It just changes the way you think about doing live ops when you can test market and et cetera with large groups of audiences. I think in terms of enabling accessibility to a game, I think guilds are a fantastic innovation, because as we've seen, one of the byproducts of success in blockchain games, can be the increase in value of desirable NFTs, that have strong capabilities inside the games. And Axie Infinity is a perfect example of that. The price of Axies went up as the game became more popular. And so it's great that we have this innovation of guilds that finds a mechanism for which to enable players to continue to be onboarded, who can't necessarily afford those upfront costs, but are very interested in playing the game and are able to have a structure in which they can still benefit from the play-to-earn economy.
Yeah, the aligned incentives has always been such an interesting idea. This rewards for participation. There were the airdrops we saw with Uniswap or the Ethereum name service, or with the Ape token recently as well. This idea that general participation, you're rewarded at a much higher level because of some of the removal of the loss filled nature of let's say some of the
Yes.
older rails that exist for these, like let's say a communication of values conversation. So I guess what's interesting, how do I phrase this question? Because there's such a significant upside for like a game player, right? You're a first time gamer, you're jumping in, you are now adopting a game that could have the potential to be the next Fortnite effectively, right? So you have a huge amount of almost venture capital incentive for the players themselves because they're being rewarded for that network participation. Do you feel that this incentive will create a much larger gaming industry than we had previously, or will this only increase it by like 20%?
So I think that the overall game industry will grow dramatically as a result of bringing all games to the blockchain. Because I think what's going to happen is that you're going to see a tremendous amount of ecosystem growth. And when you think of it from the perspective of being a player, one of the things about games today is that we're exchanging money for enjoyment in the game, and the amount of money you spend in a game should roughly correlate to the amount of time that you spend in the game, loosely. And often you spend money to enhance your playtime or to increase your playtime, but it's a one-way street. The money goes in, the time gets spent, and that's it. And if you think about a game economy where there is residual value, and I think this is where I like to focus, because I think this was an idea that we had early on in thinking about why blockchain games. I think that there's been a lot of focus on the idea that people can make money in games as a result of a play-to-earn economy or a blockchain game. And that's great. But I don't think that it should be a player's expectation that they will do this to make money. Some players will, but I think the innovation is actually that we will not lose all our money. I think that's the milestone concept, because the idea is that whatever you buy in a game, those assets are yours and you will own them, and they will have some residual value. When I buy a bunch of items that are playable in a game, they may not be worth more than I paid for them, but they're not going to be worth zero. They're going to be worth something, because there will be a secondhand market. Because when new players come into the game, they would rather pay less for the secondhand item than the first-hand item, just like a game cartridge in a console 20 years ago. Um, and so my calculus as a player will be, if I used to spend $50 a month playing games, and now I can get $5 back from selling my old stuff, then maybe I'll spend $55 instead, because I know I'm getting something back. And that's pretty reliable that I will get, 10 cents on the dollar back from my investment into game stuff. And if everybody in the industry does that, that's another 10, $20 billion right there.
Awesome. Yeah. So the idea here is that the core base is actually 20, 30%. And anything over top of that is gravy in the growth of an already
Yes.
megalithic style industry. One of my other questions here is for founders and developers. And there's a lot of people that are interested in building or maybe migrating to the space. You get
Mhm.
to meet a lot of top-notch people that are building here. Do you have any advice for founders and developers?
Wow. I guess, first of all, I can't say that I'm in a position to be giving anybody advice, to be honest.
That's fair.
We're all learning as we go. I think one of the things that I say to people is, when we all try to offer our caveated advice, is just that we've been in this part of the industry a little bit longer than others, so we've made more mistakes than many other players, and hopefully they can benefit from some of those learnings. I think the most important thing is you have to abandon as a game developer, you have to abandon many of the core principles of how games are made that you're accustomed to, and really leave yourself open to thinking about how things could be from a completely new standpoint. Because the idea, traditional games were built with the idea of this walled garden where you bring as many players in as possible, and you make money from them while they're in your game, and you try not to let players leak out of the bucket as much as you can, and keep them as long as possible so that they're making money. And a blockchain game is completely different. A blockchain game should be one where you don't care whether players are transitory, because your job is to keep the overall ecosystem going. You're trying to encourage GDP in your ecosystem rather than a one-way revenue stream. And that's a very different way of looking at an economy, because you've gone from becoming a store to becoming a city. And that's quite different as a concept.
So I guess kind of down this avenue as well, because of a lot of decentralization, a lot of technology is built from this open source
Mhm.
collaborative effort, and in some cases the video game sector had been wall garden between the different producers, the game developers. Um, Something that I found really interesting, I didn't recognize about the Bored Apes until I started to put more of the DAO structure and the seeding potential of
Mhm.
a brand and a community growing together. How do you see some of this stuff in the being taken over by the community? Like, at what point do the games, as they're being developed, get handed over and in voting control to what the community wants to see next? Like,
Sure.
yeah.
So I think, as people like to say, democracy is messy. And so I think one of the things about, our belief is that games will eventually all become DAOs. They will all become player-owned economies, because blockchain enables that future, and it's logical. Because what we've seen with games historically is that games have always gone in cycles, right? It goes up, and then 2 years later, or a year later, it starts going down, and there's a long tail. And typically, 3, 4 years on into the process, the game developer stops supporting the game because it just doesn't make enough money for it to be profitable for them to do so. Or maybe the team is just tired and they want to move on and start working on another game. And so that's the traditional life cycle of games, with rare exception. And the problem is, for really devoted, dedicated players, there's usually a small percentage of, the peak number of players that are happy to play that game forever because they love it. They found a community, they found, it's their thing. And if there was a way for them to continue to be able to pay into that game economy and enjoy it forever, if that's what they like, that would be fabulous. And blockchain enables that, because if you can turn over the game to the players through a DAO structure, then essentially they have their own economy from which they can actually have capital to hire another development studio to continue supporting the game if the original developer doesn't want to do so. So this is the way we think games are headed, but it will take time. And so we think that games need to be centrally managed, let's say, by the original developer for a period of time, because you need to build a stable economy and a stable community, and have people understand the purpose of the game, and everybody, it has to be stable for a while before you can then just turn it over to the people and have a free for all. If you do it too early, then it will be too chaotic, in our opinion.
Yeah, a lot of the time, the people who are thinking so far outside the box to have something unique are, you want running that ship during the early phases because you need that deep level of conviction to pull it off. But as it
Yes.
grows, I'm really interested to see how the community kind of takes over some of these ships and allows them to grow for that multi-decade potential, because people are still interested in collectors items. So it's a fascinating conversation for me. One of the next parts here was about the transposability of the metaverse. And the potential of seeing different characters move between these digital worlds. As a layman to the gaming sector, is there any type of universality in the writing or these engines that they're building on?
Yes.
And do you see that happening if it's not?
So at the moment, it's happening on a bespoke basis, because we don't really have much in the way of industry standards. Obviously, there are a lot of people building on certain blockchains or scaling solutions that are popular, and so as a result, a lot of people are building on Polygon or Solana or Flow or wherever, and they have that in common. But otherwise, many different technologies are disparate. So what we're doing as an industry is there are a number of companies who are coming together to try to form standards, just as a sort of an independent group, and separately, individual projects are also making an effort to try to embrace this kind of interoperability, but it has to be done on a per project basis, because you really have to think to yourself, how do I translate the art style? How do I translate, the idea that if I have a, special super powerful sword in one game, is it a super powerful sword in the other game, or does it just have entry level power when I come into the other game? So these kind of ideas and translations need to be thought through based on individual game concepts. So unfortunately, it's not that straightforward, but it has as much to do with the content and the story of games as it does actually technology, and it's more about the story. So I'll give you an example. The Sandbox, which one of our properties is working on doing lots of interoperability, but it has a different visual art style than most other projects. And so they have to figure out a way to translate that visual art style when you import, PFP projects, like, import your Bored Ape or something into the Sandbox. You have to decide what would a pixelated Bored Ape look like.
Yeah, fantastic. I like that answer. So one of the other things too that kind of caught me off guard here was this on-ramp to financial services, this grassroots adoption in countries where it was making people were making wages higher than they were capable of doing at a regular job. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the best for like who's done the best version of the kind of in-game economy, and who and where, and also where have others failed? Like, how could we be doing better?
Sure. So I think the classic example is Axie Infinity, and now it's well documented, the case of them onboarding users in the Philippines specifically, but of course in other economies as well. And I think that this is a great example where, a play to earn game really made a difference, because, during the height of the COVID lockdowns a year ago, people in the Philippines discovered Axie Infinity largely thanks to the evangelism of Gabby, who founded YGG, talking up Axie amongst everybody, all his friends and everybody he knew in the Philippines. And he identified, a way that you could basically, teach people how to play Axie to make money. And he thought to himself, look, I have all these people in my local community who are stuck at home because they're, can't go out to work and everything because of the lockdowns. And this is a way that they could make money from home. And I just have to figure out, he said, how to lend them my Axies in order for them to do that. And so the idea of the guild was born, and he wrote software to create the first guild. And that was the true innovation, I think, that catapulted the growth of Axie Infinity. It was a great game to begin with, but it didn't have crazy user numbers and in-game trading activity until all of those users were onboarded through the guild system. Because at that point in time, to buy an Axie was prohibitively expensive for most players, but the guild system was the linchpin. And I think that is a perfect illustration of why blockchain games are so exciting, because it proves that open platforms can create these kind of opportunities. Because, Gabby happens to be very close with the Axie development team personally, but he didn't actually need their permission to build guild software to run on top of Axie. It's an open platform game. And so he can create an innovation that both grows a business for him and also grows the business of Axie Infinity at the same time, because they're openly composable assets. And that is amazing, because in a traditional game, if you want to make an innovation in Fortnite, you're not doing anything unless Epic says okay.
Yeah, that's a great point. That I've always been fascinated by the open source conversation. It's almost like a freedom of speech arena. You need to battle test your ideas for them to fit properly, and because everyone has access to the same tools, you're really looking at who does the best job of providing like the most enjoyable, or let's say
Mhm.
valuable experience to one another. So one of the things I wanted to ask was about, and this is always a hard one too, because I'm going to ask you to try to tell us what the future looks like. And then I know most of the times we probably get this wrong, but I always find it's fun anyways. What are some of the not yet developed things that you think are coming?
The not yet developed things. Oh, this is hard. So um, I think, frankly, the biggest thing that everybody's waiting for that is going to be the most exciting is true, like, seamless interoperability. But I do think that, unfortunately, that's a long way off. And when I say a long way off, you know, a long way off in blockchain time, meaning 2 years, 2 years or 3 years, which in normal internet time was not that long. Um, but I think the idea that I can just bring my stuff wherever I want, whenever I want, without restriction, I think that's truly exciting, because that's a game changer. That's something that no other game can deliver, no other internet can deliver. That's something where we've upped the ante on the experience of what it means to be online dramatically, and to have it all underpinned by a secure financial layer, where we essentially combine democratization of access to finance, to entertainment, all in one. It's pretty mind-blowing, actually.
Yeah, well, I think we're just scratching the surface to lots of this stuff too. It's
Yep.
really exciting. I like being befuddled, I guess, is one of the fun things. Always being taken off guard, especially when you spend a lot. I spent a lot of time studying. It was mostly music before I got here, but it has a transposability into this sector as well. Robbie, so my last questions here are more of just a broad spectrum personal.
Mhm.
Favorite book or favorite, I guess, like lecturer, one of those two.
Oh, favorite book. Actually, it is 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel
I've
Garcia Marquez.
I've never heard of this one. I'm gonna have to check
Yeah.
this out. You want to preface us?
Um, so I fell in love when I was in college with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and he's a Colombian writer. Is it Colombian or Bolivian?
Yeah, Colombian.
Colombian. And he pioneered magical realism, and it's the most amazing stuff. It's romantic. It's fictional, and
Huh.
you have character. It's so hard to describe, but I, I'm. This is not a special observation on my part because 100 Years of Solitude, I think it might have won the Nobel Prize for Literature or something like that, or the Booker Prize or something. It's very widely liked. But check out his writing. I've read, I think, everything that he's ever written, and it's really fun stuff.
Awesome. I've got this one bookmarked now. Okay, let's do a game question. Favorite style of gameplay?
Oh no, this is going to make me look really bad because I run a game company, but honestly, I love puzzle games.
Puzzle games. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, favorite what's a puzzle? What's your like favorite puzzle game?
Oh my God. To be honest,
Yes.
Tetris.
Tetris, nice. That's that's fun. A simple yet complex structure. I like this. Well, this has been fantastic, Robbie. I know I don't want to roll too close to over our time here. I think what you guys at Animoca are doing is fantastic. I think building these things is such a huge impact, and the potential to onboard
Yes.
participatory ownership is so underestimated.
Mm,
Yeah, we are never rewarded for the growth of most of the big companies that kind of own our current metasphere. So
yes.
this makes a lot of sense for me.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of last thoughts you want to leave us out with that I didn't cover? Anything that people should check out?
No, I
All the
think yeah,
links. Yeah.
everything. I mean, all the links to the socials and stuff like that. Come check us out on Twitter, etc. But I think most importantly, for people who are interested in this stuff and haven't tried it, the most important thing is just get out there, buy yourself an NFT, go and try some of these games and have fun with it. And and also take us with a grain of salt. It's early days. We're trying our best as an industry. Some of our games aren't as polished as they otherwise could be. Don't expect us to compete with consoles that have been around for 30 years already. Um, but go out and try stuff because I think one of the beautiful things about what we do as an industry is that we do give true digital ownership. And when you finally own stuff in a game, and it changes you. It's like owning your own home when you used to rent. It's a feeling that's just different. And once you own stuff and you sell it for the first time, you get this feeling that you think to yourself, why did I play games, any other way before? It doesn't make sense to you anymore. So I think hopefully at that point we will have hooked you and you'll go deeper down the rabbit hole.
Yes, that's great. I echo this statement. Participate, play around. I'm not sure if you ever used Fork Delta, but the original like Ether Delta that was out there.
Mhm.
That stuff was blowing my mind. I was like, wait, so we're now trading peer to peer with like peer to peer chosen money. I'm like, this is amazing. I love the work you guys have done. And you're right, we're early, so be patient, ladies and gentlemen. Robbie, such a great time. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoy this content, Bear family. Definitely check out Animoca. Check out some of their games. The Sandbox is one of their biggest, most notable, and I think it's available on both iOS and Android already, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct.
So it should be pretty easy for everyone to access. And then hopefully, Robbie, we can chat again soon. I'm actually if I'll
Yeah,
keep you on for a few minutes after this.
no
Thanks,
problem.
Robbie. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
thank you very much.
Awesome.